Welcome to Story Strategy Live, episode 13, Using Idioms to Strengthen Characterization, with Evident Inc.'s lead editors, Nancy Smay and Dawn Alexander. Hi, Dawn. How are you?
Hi, I am good. How are you?
Good. Did you like my fancy intro?
I did. That was very professional.
I figured since we're now podcasting and on YouTube, we should have a more, there's no like introduction music or anything fancy like that, but that was my narration voice.
That's our next step, is the fancy music. Our next step
someday.
Someday. Yes.
Well, we'll get there. But for now, we are what we are. So welcome to those who are watching on Facebook and those who are watching us on YouTube, where we are live for the first time today, simulcasting, very fancy. We are going to be talking about idioms. So Dawn, before we do all that though, do you have a story for us?
I do. I have a fun story because, the world's just been crazy. And so having something entertaining happened. As we all know, or the world may not know, I am terrified of birds. Birds are not my thing. I don't appreciate them in any form.
Don't you have a bird?
My daughter has a bird that I do not touch and I do not go near. And the few times the little minion of Satan has gotten out of its cage and flown around the room, I just sit there frozen like a statue and scream until she comes and gets him.
Okay, well then I will confide this, because you and I, we must get along because of this shared bird hatred. But every time I've heard that thing squawk in the background, I've been like, oh God, Dawn has a bird. Oh.
Well, and okay, so here's what you need to know about it squawking. It is 3 rooms away from me. It's on the other side of the house. And loud, obnoxious little creature. It's only this big. It's a parakeet.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
So I was sitting here the other day, and my husband is also working from home, and he works in our bedroom, and I work in what would be a formal living room. But I was in the other side of the house, and he comes running out of the bedroom like it's on fire and runs out our front door. And I'm like, what are you doing? And then he comes back in, and my son was in our game room, and he's like, I don't have time to explain. I have to be on a conference call in 11 minutes, but there's some birds doing some weird stuff in the front yard, and I need you to help me with the ladder.
What?
What? And of course, my son's like in his pajamas. He doesn't have his shoes on. He's been up like 4 minutes. He's like, what? And so he's like, I said I don't have time to explain. So he runs into our garage and he gets a ladder. And it's running. And I'm like, what is going on? And he's like, there's birds doing weird stuff in the front yard.
So what? Leave them alone. Birds do weird stuff. That's what they do.
So I had to go out there because my son went out there barefoot and it had been pouring down rain. He's like, I can't hold and he comes back in. And so I had to go out there. And what happened was my husband our bedroom's on the side of the house, and he went running out because he said it sounded like somebody was banging on that window.
Uh-huh.
And when he got out there were 3 crows, big crows, up on the corner of our house. And he's like, they didn't want to leave. He said, I'm all waving my hands at him. And they finally flew over to the neighbor's house and just looked at me.
I don't like crows at all.
No. So he gets up on the ladder because they were all up in our rain gutter. And he's like, I don't know what's up there. I don't know what they've done. And he gets
what
up on
the
what they were attacking. And I'm holding the ladder, which I'm not real comfortable with anyway, because all I picture is him falling and us both dying. And there was one single acorn in the little rain gutter. And what they were doing is he thinks they were using it they were trying to break it. And so they were banging it against the rain gutter. So it was echoing down the little tube thing and making it sound like somebody was banging on our house.
Frickin' birds, man.
I know, right?
I swear to God, I was attacked by a flock of pigeons outside of, I want to say, St. Peter's Cathedral. That's probably not right. It's in New York City. I was meeting a friend on those steps, and it was awful. I was scarred for life.
Yeah, some other time I will tell you my tragic seagull story, but
all right.
It takes breathing for me to get through it.
So an idiom that we won't be using is a bird in the hand is equal to 2 in the bush, because there should be no birds anywhere at all ever, as far as I'm concerned.
Especially not in your hand ever.
No, not in my bush. No, just kidding. Sorry. I do write romance.
Okay, so let's talk about idioms.
I meant my hydrangea bush. What are you thinking?
Of course.
Yeah.
I was thinking the exact same thing.
All right. Now that we've gotten past that. Okay. So what are we talking about? What are idioms?
Well, idioms are phrases that the meaning of the phrase cannot be determined by the words used to create the phrase.
Okay.
And back when I was teaching, I loved teaching about idioms because we use them so often and they feel so natural to you that when you're trying to learn them in another language,
Oh, yeah.
it suddenly doesn't work. And it doesn't work for people trying to learn English because they don't make sense.
Yeah, it's nonsense.
So one of the assignments I used to give my students is that they had to listen for a day and pay attention to all the idioms that came up just in normal conversation. And they would always be like, oh my God, there's so many of them. Like, we can't stop using them. And now I notice them everywhere. And I'm like, yes, my evil plan is working.
Yeah,
So,
well, that's not a bad assignment, actually, just to uber focus on them. Because I don't think even I realize what comes out of my mouth half the time.
So that's why you got to pay attention to them in your writing. And so that's why we're talking about the idioms today because of that and because of the I think I nailed a dead horse.
No, that wasn't it. It was because instead of saying, what is the actual saying? Beating a dead horse. Yeah, I kept saying I nailed I nailed that horse to the ground.
Right.
Which is not the thing that people say, except for me. I say
that was in last week's episode. For those of you who don't know why we're talking about nailing horses to the ground, that was last week's episode.
Anyway, Ki says that a seagull stole her sandwich. Or else, is that a movie quote? It sounds familiar. I don't know.
No, that's exactly what happened to me too. So you're evil, evil things with no healthy fear of humans whatsoever.
No. And they're so hard to, I mean, when you want to like retaliate and inspire fear, they're quick, you know?
Yeah, they're like, what are you going to do to me?
I know. All right. Well, so let's see. How should we start? How should you not use idioms? I guess where can they be dangerous when we're working in building characters? What kinds of things should we do with them? What kinds of things should we not do with them?
Well, you want to be sure because everything that your character says and thinks is going to be part of their character development. And so there's old, tired idioms. And this was the same thing when we talked about cliches. There's old, tired idioms that you want to be sure you don't use.
Like, what do you mean?
Things like it's raining cats and dogs.
But I guess coming from a language perspective, that's like everyone knows what that one means, right?
Right.
So why wouldn't I want to use it?
Because you can use something much more specific and give a much more descriptive image for your reader.
So that one is really a cliche. It's just so overused and tired. Okay.
Yes.
So what are a couple other ones like that?
Other ones that come up like that are things like going off or going a mile a minute or open a can of worms. And yes, everybody understands them, but they're not necessarily what that particular character would think or say. It's just easier for the author to use it.
Because they're super general.
Because yes.
So you might have a different character use a different one or think of something that's very specific to that character based on, for instance, where they're from or how they grew up or what their job is.
Yes. And I had this experience recently because obviously I live in Texas. That's very clear from my accent. I'm fine with it. I've never lived any place north at all. And so there's certain idioms that we use, obviously, in Texas that, we have our own world and it makes perfect sense to us. And if y'all don't understand, well, bless your heart. And so,
which, by the way, is not a nice thing. I learned every time I've ever heard anyone say "bless her heart," they mean something totally different than that.
It can be nice. It is one of those that is. It depends on it's very situational.
I suppose
it depends on how you feel about things. So I was editing recently for one of our clients, and she gave permission for me to share this story. I would not share specific client work without permission. And so she's in the Northeast, and she had a scene in her book where this cat does something it's not supposed to, and then later it's trying to be really nice to the owner. And the owner, who's supposed to be a character in her late 20s from Maine, says to the cat, "Oh, don't you try to soft soap me."
Never heard it.
I've never heard that. And I was like, and so I tagged it, which means I just put a comment, and I just put a comment that said, "I'm not familiar with this phrase." And she'd reply, because we go back and forth on our comments sometimes. And she'd replied with, "Well, it means to sweet talk or to cajole or try to coax," something like that. And so when going over the feedback, I said, "Well, in this case, I would use sweet talk." And her response to that cracked me up, because she said, "Sweet talk sounds very Southern to me." And I was like, well, yes, because I am very Southern, so that makes perfect sense. But
I grew up in California, and I think that's something that I grew up with. I think it's familiar.
Right. And so the idea where we landed on it was, would that character use that phrase?
I think that's the key.
Is it a character? It's this character who's a 20-something girl from Maine. Would she have used this phrase? And when you find out the character's backstory, you find out that the character was raised predominantly by her grandmother. And so, yes, this is a phrase she would use. So, but I'm really interested, anybody watching, if you've heard that phrase, if you're familiar with that phrase, or if that's just something I haven't encountered in my life. And
the "don't try to soft soap me" one.
Yeah, don't try to soft soap me.
I'm also curious what other common overused idioms we maybe didn't mention that people can think of. If you want to throw it in the comments, you're welcome to.
Yes, because I can rattle off tons of them, because we see them all the time.
I love them. I honestly, some of those are the things that come out of people's mouths are just so funny sometimes. And when they say something like that, and I wrote a character that was from the South, who throws off a couple of these, and I had to research to figure out like some really good ones. But when people say them as if they are everyday language to people to whom they are not everyday language, they're just so freaking funny. You're like, what did you just say to me?
Well, and one of the things that got this discussion started with us is I was telling you about my aunt. I have an aunt who, of course, I'm in Texas, so she's not blood related, but she's still my aunt.
We have those.
She was here one day, and she was talking about her grandson was playing in a football game, and it was a really big deal. And originally the coach wasn't going to put him in. And she said, and I will never forget this, she said, "Well, of course, once the coach put him in, he shined like a penny shoved up a goat's ass."
Okay.
Which is a good thing. This means he did really, really good.
To me, that would not be a good thing, because I'm thinking if it's shoved up in there, it's super dark and not shiny at all.
Right.
So she's saying like he did not shine. He did poorly. But no.
Right. But no, that's not what it means.
Definitely not.
And that's a perfect example, as far as I'm concerned, of you automatically know some things about my aunt when you hear that phrase.
Yes. So let's talk about how you can use idioms then to sort of enhance characterization or to reinforce it, maybe.
Yes.
Yes.
So
do that now, Dawn.
I was expecting you to put a banner up.
I can do that. Hold on, I'll make a banner.
So you know things about my aunt that's all I have to tell you about her right there, and you have created a picture in your mind. And so that picture probably isn't someone who, a guy working in a boardroom wearing a tie is not going to say that to his board of directors in a corporate meeting.
It'd be funny though.
It would. And sometimes they can be used to really, add some humor and really add some deeper characterizations, especially if you have characters who they're very, very formal. And then when they start getting mad, they use these phrases.
Right. And I think, so I was just thinking, when I have used them, and I will, if you guys want, read a couple examples from my own work where I've used them to enhance characterization. But in both of the cases that I would share, they've been side characters. And I don't know if that's because I've gone, well, I write rom-com for one thing. So I go a little over the top with what I think is funny. So maybe that's why like these side characters can be kind of ridiculous, but I don't necessarily want my main characters to be ridiculous or to be over stereotypical. So I guess what you just said, and now it's kind of flown my mind like a bird, is a way that you could use them with your main character. Oh, where like they're, totally straight and narrow, but when they get really fired up, all of a sudden their Southern roots start slipping out or something.
Right.
And I think that doing something like that is a way to add dimension to a character, whereas what I was talking about with side characters is kind of, those characters are pretty two-dimensional because they're just over here. You only see them once or twice in the whole book, and they don't need to be really deep.
But using those idioms and using the kind of language that fits them immediately creates an image for the reader without you having to spend a whole lot of time with the secondary character.
Exactly. So it's a way, without saying she had, short gray hair and was a matronly type, or, anything that you might use to describe an older woman from the South or something who's sort of like your aunt. You can throw a couple of these out of her mouth and you kind of already get that image, just like you said with your aunt. Julie says, I'm in the heart of Amish Mennonite country. I just moved from there. There are plenty of idioms in that culture. And we didn't, like where I lived in that, I don't know if this is true for you, Julie, but in Maryland, where I just came from, we lived in parallel. And the cultures did interact a little bit, mostly in commerce, but not socially. And so I never had the opportunity to really pick up a whole lot of Amish or Mennonite idioms, but I'd be super curious what some of them are if you did.
Okay, so fun fact, I worked at a bakery in college that was run by Mennonites.
Really?
In Oklahoma.
That is fascinating.
I don't remember any of their idioms, and that's a conversation we can have some other time. But yes, I'm like, I have direct interaction with Mennonites. So
very interesting. I just think, and all cultures have their interesting parts for sure. Anything that's other is always interesting. But what was fascinating to me was that parallelism, the fact that like it was almost like there were two worlds existing. And while I was very curious about their world, I don't think, like ours is just out there to absorb. I don't think they were curious about me and my YouTube watching kids and, but we would watch the horse and buggies go by and the little bonnets. And I was just always like, wow, like I want to know about that. I should read Amish romance maybe.
There you go. Well, and okay, so what you're saying kind of leads into our next point.
Good, because we've gotten way off track.
I know. Because one of the things that's going to influence the idioms that your character is going to use is going to be their age and location and that kind of thing. And if you've spent any time around teenagers, you will learn very quickly that they have a completely different world of language than we do. And the way they speak to each other is going to be different than the way they speak to an adult most of the time. So if you're writing YA or if you're writing a teenage character, you have to be very careful not to stereotype them. And you also want to make sure that their idioms fit. And so, like, for example, my daughter is 18. She's never heard a broken record. She's not going to tell me I sound like a broken record because she doesn't know what that is.
Yeah, it's sort of like those Facebook memes where you have the cassette tape and the pencil, and it says like no one under this age will know what to do with these two things together.
Exactly. And so you want to make sure with your teenage characters that you sound like an actual teenager. But here's the trick to that, because their language changes so fast that you don't want to date your book by using words that they don't use. And so I wrote a blog post about using idioms and using them for character development like we're talking about right now. And I made the point that my daughter, who was 16 at the time, would not come home and say, "Oh, mother, I have such salacious news for you today." She would run in the door yelling, "Mama, I've got some hot tea."
See, I had never heard that one before. That must be Southern.
Because tea is gossip, and hot tea is really good gossip. And if you spill the tea, you're spreading the gossip.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
So all of those are idioms.
See, on the other hand, my tween boys are running around going, "I'm a dip," and walking away. And I'm like, I guess that means he's leaving. Like,
oh, yeah.
How do you keep up with this stuff?
You just nod.
I was like, when are we just going to go back to calling things rad and gnarly and saying, I don't know. Never. I'm old now.
So you've got to be careful when you're writing these characters that you're not using words that by the time your book is being read, that they're going to be like, well, nobody says that anymore. Yeah. For example, lit was a big.
It's not lit fam anymore.
I don't think it's lit fam anymore. I think lit's on the way out. My favorite one that was popular for a while was got beef. Yeah. Like the two of us got beef.
Oh, I get what you meant. I thought you meant the commercial from the 80s.
Right. Well, that's why I thought it was funny, because I pictured these little old women.
Yeah.
It means that, two teenagers who are mad at each other. Well, we got beef with each other.
Right.
Which just creates an odd mental image of like this big old slab of meat between them. And so there's a line there that you've got to kind of figure out, how can you make this character feel authentic without dating them and without making them feel like a stereotype?
Yeah. Well, so what kinds of questions can writers ask themselves as they're writing these characters to figure out if they're being authentic or if they're using them right?
I think the main question you've got to ask yourself is, does this phrase fit my character? Is this something my character would say?
Which might take research if you don't hang out with teenagers.
Yes.
Go watch YouTube a lot or something.
They're not scary. I've spent 90% of my life with teenagers because I taught high school for a really long time, and then I lived with two of them. They'll talk to you. You just have to listen.
Yeah, they're scary.
And the Disney Channel is not an accurate representation. Let me just put that out there.
I continue to suggest YouTube. I have learned so many things as my children have watched other people play video games on YouTube. And the fact that that's even a thing is shocking to me, but that's a whole other topic.
Yes. So the first question you want to ask is, does this fit my character's background? Does it fit their age? Does it fit their location? And does it fit the situation? Right. So those are all. And then the next thing would be, is there a better way to say it? And this is one of those things of, if you're using these idioms in dialogue and they fit the character, then use it to build your character, or in the character's thoughts. Both of those are a good way to build your character. It's when it slips into description, or when it slips into the narrative part that isn't directly from the character, where it starts to feel inauthentic. And
I'm sorry, I was just going to kind of enhance that. If the narrator, in the little in-betweeny parts between where the character is necessarily thinking to himself or herself, and the narrator adds like he's walking across the room, kind of commentate. What's the word? Commentary. You have to make sure, and between characters too, that you're not using the same idiom. You don't want two characters to always say it's raining cats and dogs, because if anything, if you're going to use it, make it specific to one.
Yes. And you can have one character who, for example, if you wanted to have a teenage character who speaks very proper and uses older idioms because they were raised by their grandparent, that's fine, because that fits that character.
Right.
And then the last question I would say is, can I come up with something that creates a more vivid picture, or that is more descriptive? And so basically, can I do better? Is there something better language that I could use here?
Right. All right. Well, I think they're super fun, but as with everything, they can be overused, and they can be used kind of in a wrong way. So just one more thing to kind of pay attention to as you're working through your manuscript and trying to figure out who your people are and what they're doing, and so many things to keep in mind.
Well, and I want you to read some of your examples because
Okay.
you have two very fun characters.
I just have to figure out how to navigate all my many windows here on this one tiny, tiny screen. But I did pull them up. And now there's 37,000 other things on top of them. Okay. So I can't see you right now, but I'll pretend like I can. So these are, as I said, they're both examples of side characters who, so less important to the plot, obviously. They were added, either to highlight a point or to allow the main character to say something or realize something that was important. And so the first one is from Mr. Match from the first book in the series, which is Scoring the Keeper's Sister, when Erica, who is my heroine, goes into the office and she's trying to figure some stuff out. So there's another lady that works in the office who she doesn't talk to often, but, is just there. And so you don't learn a lot about her until this little tiny scene right here where, quiet in here today, Annette observed, pausing in front of my desk. Annette was from Southern Georgia, and I generally enjoyed chatting with her, mostly because I'd learned some of the most colorful expressions of my life from her. When the air conditioning in the offices broke, she told me it was hotter than 2 rabbits screwing in a wool sock. And when Theo had come in, storming in here last week, she'd commented that if brains were leather, that boy wouldn't have enough to saddle a June bug. I was keeping these gems on a little notepad in my desk for future use. It is, I agreed, waiting for the latest addition to my list of hilarious Southern sayings. Annette and I stared at each other a long minute, and I felt both awkward and let down. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. Anything else, Annette? Nah, girl, just wondering why you're looking like you just found out Chevrolet quit making trucks. She leaned her generous hip on the side of my desk and made a sad little pout with her fuchsia-painted lips. I'm okay, I said, deciding that this expression must mean I looked sad. Just worried about this news piece with Theo's ex. And then a little bit later, she's talking about Theo, who is the team owner, his ex-wife. And she says, that lady's got a big old hole in her screen door, which I liked. I had to look those up.
Well, and that totally just shows you right there. I mean, you instantly have a picture of that character.
Right, but it's a pretty stereotypical picture. So you have to be pretty careful. And I mean, I'm not saying that I'm always real savvy when I'm writing, because I just sort of go off in a direction, as you know. But I was aware that this, like some people from the South could take offense at me over stereotyping this woman. But at the same time, the things out of her mouth I thought were funny. So it was supposed to be a funny book. And then the other example I had was from Second Chance Spring, which is my single tree series. And in this one, and now I've lost the document again. How did I do that? So Paige is a doctor, and she accepts, she's not going to, so she accepts a job at a medical practice where the lead physician who hired her, if I could find this thing again, I have so many documents open, Dawn, it's just sad. And none of them will come up. The right one won't come up. Is this it? No. Well, I might not get to read the second one because I'm a disaster. But basically, it purposely took a bunch of idioms and turned them on their heads. Like the guy could not keep them straight in his head. So he said things like, I don't want you to be too busy. I don't want you to feel like a cat out of water. Cats are not generally in water, so ha ha ha. And then he says at some point, and this was something my husband, oh no. Oh, you're still there. Oh, good.
We're still here. I don't know where you went, but we're still
I want
here.
my office back. This is awful. Like the whole screen just like disappeared, and I was like, oh. I'm glad I said oh no and not something else. But so my husband actually worked with somebody who said that he wanted everyone to get their teeth wet. And he was like, I just don't really know what that means.
Yeah, that's the awkward part, is when you are in a conversation with somebody and you say something and realize either they don't know what you meant or they say something and you don't know what they meant.
I will just stop them and be like, I've never heard that one before.
Right, yes.
What in the world did that mean?
What did you just say?
Yes, but they can be fun, and I think they can add a lot of color in the right places. Anything else about idioms? Anyone else have comments, questions about idioms?
We have a couple of comments. One says that tea is also truth.
Oh, okay.
And then the other one says, I knew spill the tea one, but not the others.
Well, and I've heard spill the beans, but that's, you know what that means, right? That's totally different.
Yeah.
That's like if you're keeping a secret.
Right. And then, yeah,
Shouldn't that get your feet wet? Yes. Exactly. And that's why it's funny, because this man said to my husband that he wanted him to, you know, start his new job, get his teeth wet. And my husband was like, my teeth. Like, you want me to have some coffee or
take a drink of water?
Yeah. So, all right. Well, let's talk about what's next. So, okay. I think we mentioned that our schedule's a little unscheduled-ish because there's still total chaos in Nancy land. But it is moving towards less chaos because we are actually, I think I'm going to have an office again in like a week, 2 weeks at the outset. But we're moving into an actual house in a week. So I won't be in the living room with bad lighting and my kids running through the room. And I might actually be somewhat organized. So we are planning an episode next week, Thursday, as usual. And sorry for the time difference on this one. That was also a Nancy chaos thing. But we'll stick with the previous time, I think, if that works for Dawn.
That's fine.
Okay, so next week, what are we going to talk about?
Next week, we are talking about dialogue.
Yay,
and
I love dialogue.
Kind of connects to what we talked about today with the idioms and making the dialogue authentic to your characters. So we're going to talk about that. And then we're going to talk about tagging the dialogue and formatting the dialogue and all things dialogue.
And also a little bit about how dialogue can affect pacing and how dialogue can differ from like a romantic suspense to a straight romance to a rom-com to a thriller. And different ways you can use dialogue as a tool to really kind of sharpen your scenes or your entire manuscript. So that will be fun. And then we are planning some guests.
Yes.
Authors that you have heard of, authors that you have read. I know I already name dropped Sierra Simone because she's the only one I've actually spoken to but have not scheduled. But I have a few others up my sleeve that I'm pretty sure will be willing to come chat with us. And Dawn, did you have someone we can name drop or not quite yet?
Not. I have somebody who's unofficial, but yes,
okay.
we have people coming to visit. We'll just throw that out there. People will come play with us. We've just got to get them all scheduled.
Clients and non-clients, but good writers that are willing to come talk about how they look at things and how they do things. So I always think that's interesting. And we'll get those on the schedule probably starting August, I would guess. And then probably well into the fall, given how many we're talking about. So by then we might have fancy music. I don't know.
I think we should. I think if we're bringing people over, we got to clean up and look nice. So
got to put on a bow tie. Okay. Well, we will work on that in the back end. But in the meantime, you guys keep working on your stories. Throw your questions at us. Feel free to just say hello and let us know what kinds of things you'd like us to talk about.
We'd love to hear any idioms that y'all know of that we didn't bring up or that you've seen or.
Yeah, we should start an idiom post. And Dawn, if you wouldn't mind, we can either pull that blog post over to Evident Ink or just share the link to your, where it is now, on the Evident Ink page. Because I think it was very well written and really illustrates what we were talking about today.
We also need to mention that we have a brand new Evident Ink Pinterest page that I'm excited about because I like to go play on Pinterest. It's a little thin right now, but it will get all filled up and all pretty. So if you are on Pinterest, come find us.
If you find that Pinteresting, then by all yeah, go follow. And I don't know, I don't Pinterest, so I'm not good at it. I don't even know how to talk about it. Go do those things that you do.
Yes. And then we have classes.
Yes, we have 3 courses available right now. The first one is free. That is formatting a manuscript for editing or submission. The second one is Deep POV, which I think, are you still offering a discount on that course, Dawn?
Yes, until August 1st.
Okay, so you have one more month.
Coupon code first class until August 1st.
Okay, and that's Deep POV. And then we also have a newly revamped, it was called Elements of Romance. I just renamed it today, and I don't remember what I called it. Plotting a romance, I think, the easy way, which is just a quick and easy method for plotting out a romance. And that one is also discounted SS10. is the discount code. I knew it was up there. It just took me a second to access the file. So go take classes, leave us comments, send email if you need to. We're always willing to book editing as well. So whatever you need, we've got it. And if you're watching on YouTube, somewhere around here will be a subscribe button. So hit that. All right?
Yes, please subscribe to us.
Oh, someone says, Laura says, I try not to use Pinterest because I end up falling down the rabbit hole and lose hours of writing time. The only thing I have used Pinterest for, I almost said interest, is like house stuff, like looking at colors and decorating and that kind of stuff.
There's a whole world of writing stuff there. There's a whole world. And I will tell you, my way to keep from falling down the rabbit hole is I set a timer of, okay, I have this amount of time to play. And then when the timer goes off, I have to physically stop and get up and go do something else and come back and reopen my browser so it's not on Pinterest anymore. But yeah, it's a whole writing world. There's tons of resources there.
I found I started a Delancey Stewart page and then found, I mean, when you're trying to write, do other stuff, and then you've got the social media platform building stuff to do, you can only do so much. So I had to pick a couple platforms, and Pinterest is not my favorite. So it's out there, the Delancey Stewart page, but it's not impressive in any way. But all right, well, I think we're pretty much wrapped up. So why don't we say goodbye, and we'll see you guys next week.
Bye.
Bye. Keep writing, guys. Have fun.